Boris Collardi, welcome to CNN Money Switzerland. Now, you are probably the best known banker here in Switzerland. And for years now, you've been living and breathing the industry, but it has to have been quite a year for you so far.
I think 2018 started greatly because, as you know, after 23 years, for the first time, I'm on kind of a garden leave, and I can observe the industry a bit from a distance. It's very interesting what's going on.
Well, you're kind of in quite a unique position, really. Obviously, you left Julius Baer at the end of last year. You haven't yet started as a partner at Pictet, but you are in a good position to talk about the Swiss banking landscape. And would you agree that it's at a turning point now?
I think it has been in a phase of transition for probably the good part of the last 10 years, especially after the financial crisis. Things have changed once and for all. And I think we're coming kind to an end of a first cycle of transformation, but we're still in a transition phase.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges then facing Switzerland?
I think there are a couple of things that have happened. I think we've seen post-2007 financial markets have never been the same with central bank intervention and a number of things happening. Low interest rates environment. We've tested new models that financial institutions didn't know before. On the regulatory side, we've, from Switzerland, started to take on a number of international standards, and Switzerland, with its leadership position, has been always one of the first to adopt new standards. We've seen also quite a few changes in terms of technology, interaction between bank and clients, and basically new entrants into the industry, while at the same time a massive wave of consolidation.
All right, let's talk about regulation then, first of all. And it's a pretty tough relationship between Bern and Brussels at the best of times, and it's getting tougher. What is the way forward for Swiss banks to access the European market?
I think if you just look at the importance of Europe in Switzerland, and in particular to financial services, you will see that about a third of all money managed in Switzerland for private clients is for European clients. So there is an intrinsic need for European clientele to be served out of Switzerland. And this has become increasingly difficult in the last few years because we do not have a standard market access for all markets. And I think if there is one thing that we need to continue to strive for, is to have market access to serve those clients. These are clients that do not want to be served out of their home country for reasons of quality of service and competence in the first place.
But to balance the kind of regulation here in Switzerland and the regulation in Europe, you know, this equivalence issues is pretty tricky.
I think Switzerland has done a pretty good job, and I think over the last few years with all these new rules and laws that have been developed that still need to be passed actually through our federal process. But I think we've found a very good compromise on FIDLEG, FINIG, on all these things. I think we can say today that the consumer protection, the general rule of engagement in the Swiss financial markets are absolutely equivalent to the European ones. So any postponement of equivalence, I think, is a pure political agenda.
And Switzerland's done away or done enough in dispelling the kind of poor reputation it had with banking secrecy. Do you think it has done enough?
I think today Switzerland has closed that chapter. I think the reforms have been passed, the lessons have been learned. Everyone I talk to in the industry is looking forward, is working on competences, on processes, on proper due diligence and doing the right thing.
So it plays no role in the Swiss banking offer anymore?
I think the whole works of the past is gone for good.
Okay, let's talk about some of the other challenges then facing Swiss banking. How much of your experience in IT way back when formed your strategy as a company leader?
I think technology is always a great topic because it forces you to think in a structured way. And once you've kind of put your hands into the hood, you start understanding how things have to work into sequence. And definitely technology has helped my way of thinking in many great ways. And now I kind of having a second spring of technology, because technology across all industries and in financial services in particular could be what is going to make a company survive or fail in future.
Okay, but do you see digitalization at the expense of human impact in the banking sector? Do you think they'll have fewer jobs?
I think I can speak only with authority on wealth management, and I think technology is going to be a great help, but it will not replace ultimately the human contact, which is the base of trust. How you discuss about your wealth, your family, your succession, very private things. I think elements of the value chain will be helped, replaced, optimized, improved by the use of technology.
I mean, certainly digitalization has had a huge impact on trading, for example. With regard to wealth management, then, do you think it could have quite as drastic a change to the way wealth management is carried out in the future?
I think if you look at the different parts of the value chain and simplifying it, if you look at everything that has to do with execution, back office, that is transactional, I think this will change and will go through new platforms, new technologies, and I think blockchain will play an important role there. On the product side, definitely there will be further innovation, there will be automation, there will be more opportunity for clients to customize products to their needs directly at their finger.
And for me, as a customer, how would I see that change?
I think you're going to see it through the different channels that you're going to be able to have access to. So the way of advising you is not going to be only rendered through the banker, but can be through your iPad, iPhone. But ultimately, the personal advice and maybe the advice in the context of your risk appetite, your investment return appetite, that's still going to be ultimately validated by the banker. And
blockchain is clearly the big technology behind Bitcoin, which is, I guess, the story of 2017. Where do you stand? Where do you stand on Bitcoin, first of all?
If you allow me, I'll just say that I think blockchain is a great piece of technology. Could be one of the greatest inventions of the last 10 years. And I think is going to influence change, and the solution application will be built on it that will change the way we've done things in the past. Think of areas like SWIFT, where you have to wait for settlements, for payments to come. Everything could be immediate on a kind of a global ledger thanks to blockchain. Now, Bitcoin is the first most famous application developed on blockchain. I think it's not really transparent. Nobody really understands the dynamics of it. And at this stage is kind of looks more speculative than a real investment class. Okay,
but blockchain's the kind of the real hero here. Do you think that banking could actually lead the way in blockchain use and technology in the future?
I think banking is, areas of banking are already using blockchain. If I look at trading platforms, I think the whole area, the transactional area, everything that is transaction sending instruction from one party to another, I think give it another 3 to 5 years, will all be based on blockchain for financial services.
But surely that kind of bypasses the need for my local bank. If I'm using blockchain technology to make my transactions, then I don't need a bank manager.
I think there is the transaction part and there is the advice part. And I think obviously there will be ways of accessing markets directly through blockchain, but I think you are well advised to use a professional institution to ultimately decide what you want to buy or sell or how you want to invest your money.
And you think that we could see these changes in 3 to 5 years?
I think the transactional part, absolutely. I think the advice part, we're talking a lot about the robo-advisors. I think these are more robo-assistants. They're going to help you come through a huge number of information and then focus on what one or the other proposal could be in the context of your needs. And then you still have to decide which one is the right thing for yourself.
And Switzerland as a hub for this kind of technology, we've already seen the development of Crypto Valley in Zug.
In Zug, absolutely. No, I think Switzerland is on absolutely the right train when it comes to technology. I think there isn't an executive I talk to or I know that doesn't have the use of blockchain, what to do about cryptocurrencies, or how do you leverage the huge amount of data that banks have as a competitive advantage in future.
And are you using blockchain already?
I think in a firm where I used to work, it was an application that was provided by a third-party bank in the execution.
But it is going to become more and more.
Absolutely, and I think it will come from investment banking, from execution, from trading. I think this will be the first practical applications of blockchain.
So just paint me a picture, if you will, look into your crystal ball, and what will banking look like in 5 to 10 years' time, do you think?
I think it will be even
very different?
I think it will be different. 10 years is still a short period of time, as we know, but it will look different. And I think we'll see champions emerging and they will differentiate themselves by the way they use technology and data. And I think that's what we've seen also in other industries.
And Switzerland as a financial center compared to other countries when it comes to blockchain?
I think Switzerland will be at the forefront. Whether it will be the first one or the second one, that I think we will see. It also depends on the regulatory framework, but I think we can see that FINMA is on the topic as well. There is huge investment pool in Switzerland, be it players in the financial services industry or private money investing in technology. And I think there's a good environment. There is the critical mass. There are the brains that are attracted to come. So we have all the prerequisite to be successful on this.
Okay, let's broaden our conversation to markets outside of Switzerland and Europe. US President Donald Trump, he is going to be at WEF this year. Are you?
I will not go this year.
Okay, but if you were there, would you like to meet him?
I think absolutely. It must be very interesting. Probably one of the personalities of the year.
What would your question to him be then?
I'm mostly interested in markets and economy, and I would probably ask him what is his appreciation of today's market levels and where do we go from here.
Okay, and the US economy itself is in a pretty good shape. I'm sure that's exactly why he is going to WEF this year. How can Swiss banks kind of gain profit from that, from the US economy?
I think broadly Swiss banks are taking advantage of it by virtue of where the overall financial markets are going these days. And what we've seen, if you look at just stock exchange statistics and if you look at a little bit volatilities and volumes, you can see that activity has picked up across the board. Cash balances on clients' accounts have been reduced over the last 12 months more significantly than in the previous 3 to 5 years. So people don't want to be negative anymore. They think they need to be part of the market. And this is great for Swiss banks, be it out of Switzerland or in the very international footprint that they have.
And the tax situation and the changes that Trump has made in the United States, is that detrimental at all to Swiss companies?
I don't think it will be detrimental. I think this is just a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And I think a lot of that money will go back into the system in a way or in another.
And would you think that with Trump as a president, as a solution for banks who remain here in Switzerland, do you think it would be easier for them with Trump in charge?
I think there's been a big talk and some action on deregulation. Certainly, I think the wave that we've seen up until a year and a half ago, was global standards always going in one direction. We see the US having paused a little bit on that, and this has casted some shadows, some doubts on where other jurisdiction would go, simply because banks have complained by saying, hey, we cannot be non-competitive compared to our US peers.
Last year you were at WEF, and last year you saw Xi Jinping talking with a very different outlook on globalization to Donald Trump, who is going this year. And Asia is a huge market for Switzerland. How do we play a role there in Swiss banks?
I think Swiss banks are extremely well positioned in Asia. First of all, the Asian clientele is absolutely in love with the Switzerland brand. Anything that comes from Switzerland, they implicitly have a high respect for it. And if I look at wealth management, probably 3 out of the top 6 banks in Asia for wealth management are Swiss banks. So the clients consume the Swiss product, but locally. So what we've seen over the last few years is that in order to serve the Asian client, you've got to be in Asia.
You famously spent a lot of time in Asia over the last few years. Will you continue to do so?
No, absolutely, is kind of my second home anyway.
Do we have enough access to China, do you think?
I think the access to China is, on one side, huge potential, and it's an amazing, probably one of the largest markets in the world. And at the same time, it's also probably the most difficult one because the barriers to access are high, starting from the language, the kind of licenses you can get to run the business are not harmonized in the way that we understand them. I mean, to run a proper wealth management business, you need 3 licenses in China.
And how did you break down those kind of cultural barriers when you were there?
Well, I think you need to work with local people. I think it's very clear. There is high local content, a bit in terms of language, but also in terms of culture. Within an hour flight, you are in 2 totally different worlds. Take Indonesia and take Thailand. You're comparing 2 countries which are almost neighbors, but that are actually fundamentally totally different in language, culture, religion. So you need to work with local people that understand the markets.
And what are your key markets in Asia?
I mean, if I just look in terms of GDP growth, number of ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals, just purely statistically, the biggest markets are China, which you could expand into Greater China. Mainland China growing obviously faster than Hong Kong and Taiwan, but very large pools of wealth are in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And then if you go to Southeast Asia, you've got to be in Singapore. Indonesia is an incredible market. And then you have a number of other markets that are also interesting, but that are either a little bit more remote, a little bit more advanced, or a little bit more concentrated. And this all ex-Japan.
But are clients' expectations in Japan and China different to client expectations here in Europe when it comes to private banking?
I think Japan is pretty much aligned to what European clients would expect because it's an aging population, there is less wealth creation, a lot of people need to live off their savings. So they're more of a mature market. Whereas if you take China, if you take Indonesia, these are markets that are developing markets. There are people, I recall a few years ago meeting an entrepreneur in China and he was telling me, why should I even invest into my money through a bank? I can double my money every 3 years in my own company. So they're still in wealth creation and their needs are totally different than the one of mature markets.
Are they bigger risk takers?
They love to take risk in their business. Otherwise, they wouldn't be growing, they wouldn't be developing the businesses and the industries that we've seen. On the private side, they like some of them to take a bit more leverage, a bit more risks. But over the last few years, especially in China, they've understood the concept of being diversified. In the past, it was like, okay, renminbi will only always appreciate, which we've seen wasn't the case. And they thought that stock market valuation would double every 3 years with a straight line. And we've also seen that that wasn't the case.
And when you go over there, how welcome are Asian cultures to the Swiss brand?
I think it's kind of a fusion meeting of minds. There is really, I have to say, Switzerland is probably one of the countries that has one of the best accesses in Asia. They admire everything about Switzerland, and Swiss people have been in Asia for hundreds of years. I mean, I was in Japan, I think 2 years ago, and we were with the Swiss delegation celebrating 150 years, if I recall correctly, of trade between Switzerland and Japan. So Swiss people actually have been adventurers into Asia for a very long time, and they have a deep understanding about Asia.
And this is something that we can only build upon.
Absolutely. That's a very friendly region of the world for Switzerland.
Being one of the best known bankers in Switzerland, and your move was widely commented on, how does that kind of public and media reaction and interest in you make you feel?
I think it's just temporary, frankly. I mean, it's nice. It's a recognition on one side of a job that has been done with a lot of sweat and a lot of passion. On the other side, I think, as you know, I will be joining a private company, and that has been also one of my motivation after being in a public listed company for many years.
And you said it was the kind of entrepreneurship side to the role that kind of really attracted you. What did you mean by that?
I mean, it's very simple. You can be a CEO and a very good CEO, but you remain an employee. And I thought, okay, I should maybe now try something different.
So this is for you, this
Absolutely.
new role. And do you have any kind of reservation about, leaving a team that you've been with for so long?
I have to say my experience has been over the years, I've been at my best and I've learned the most when I'm outside of my comfort zone. And now I'm going to be outside of my comfort zone. I felt that that's when you learn, you ask questions, you kind of question everything you know, and that's when you grow as an individual.
I hear you. Now, the banking industry is pretty tough, even at the best of times. You feel fit for the role?
As fit as one needs to be.
And how do you handle all the travel as well? I mean, we're often talking about business leaders and how they manage their time, how they manage all the travel, and how they focus their minds in high pressure. When we were speaking just before we started this interview about really focusing and being on your game at the right time, and how do you ensure that?
I think over the years, what I felt helped certainly is to have a certain discipline, which is the same that you have across many people that need to perform at some point in time. And that's basically enough sleep. Different people need different number of hours, but no drinking, no. And I think if you have a kind of a discipline there, you can go on for quite a while.
Okay, so you haven't had that discipline, though, for the last few weeks, and you won't start at Pictet until a little bit later this year. How are you finding your time not at work?
I have to say, fantastic. It's the first time in my life that I have so much time on my hands. It's not easy, when you come from an environment where everything is set, when you're in the corporate world, on January 1st, you already know your 53 meetings of the year, where you're going to be in Davos and this and the press conference and that retreat and those days, weeks presentation. And now all of a sudden you have no reference point until June 1st. So I'm trying to dedicate it to family, traveling and learning some new things.
Has it perhaps given you a different perspective?
It always does. It always does. I think when you take a bit of, you kind of raise above the day-to-day, you always have a better perspective.
And how are you spending your time?
I'm trying to travel as much as I can now with the family. I think this is a great opportunity to take longer trips, spend good quality time. I'm trying to learn new things. So I was 2 days ago in London trying to learn a little bit about influencer marketing.
That doesn't sound like time off to me.
Look, I think when you're learning new things, it's actually very interesting. It doesn't feel like you're working.
Okay, and you're not bored yet then?
No, not at all. Not a minute.
Okay, Boris Collardi, thank you very much indeed.